Hey guys, it's Liv here, and in today's video, I want to go over the strongest Pokemon that are currently leaked to be coming back in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet 1.2. Well, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of Pokemon that I'm missing, and I want to make sure for the comment question of the day, you guys answer. I'm going to link something in the pinned comments. I'll also put something in the description in case you haven't seen the list, but for anyone who has seen the list, I'm assuming those are the people who are on this video. What do you think is the strongest Pokemon that I did not mention that is coming back? Or really, what's just your favorite Pokemon coming back? That's another one. What's your favorite Pokemon that's currently slated to be coming back? Whether it's on this list or not, what is it? It can be for competitive reasons, it could be for non-competitive reasons, whatever the one is. That's the comment question of the day. But I'm going to go over Pokemon based on that listed set of, I think it's like 200 something that are coming back, and I'm going to go over the ones that I think will affect VGC the most. Now, these could be for varying reasons realistically, but I do think that these Pokemon are all going to essentially meet the viable threshold of competitiveness. So with that said, let's get started with our first Pokemon, an already fairly strong way to start this list, Venusaur. Now, I already think that Venusaur is probably truthfully one of the strongest that we're going to be getting in this. There's going to be some stronger ones for sure as we get down the list. Some I'm sure you guys are already aware of, but some other ones that I think might be overlooked as well. But I think if Venusaur is already a strong contender, this will reshape Sun as a playstyle, as it is. Sun right now really just relies on Paradox Mons. You don't really see Scovillain, for example, and it's a pretty shit mon at that. But Venusaur with the Chlorophyll ability will already be a fairly better option than this. We have Chlorophyll, obviously. We'll most likely get moves such as Earth Power, Giga Drain, Weather Ball. If I had to guess, at the very least, even without Weather Ball though, Terra Blast could still be a fairly good option that could be a little more consistent too. One of the biggest reasons that Venusaur actually does benefit from the Sun, though, is the fact that Venusaur could just go for a Terra Fire. Now, we don't currently, outside of Scovillain, have a Chlorophyll Pokemon that can take advantage of Terra Fire, or really just Fire type in general, because I guess Terra Fire is something that can benefit from. But we don't have a Sun Pokemon that really benefits from from Fire typing with the Speed Chlorophyll ability as well. But with Terrestrial, though, Venusaur could take advantage of this. It's a really good Terra Fire abuser with the ability to use stuff like Weather Ball if it does transfer over, which will already boost the damage that its Fire type attacks do. In tandem with moves such as Earth Power, Sludge Bomb, and Giga Drain, you could really make this thing like an all-arounder, really strong attacker that would have 3 different really unique stabs between Fire, Poison, and Grass, while also being able to hit a majority of the metagame. A Pokemon that might, for example, try and check this thing naturally would be something like Gastrodon, which pre-Terra would obviously lose to the Grass moves, but post-Terra would still typically lose to stuff like Earth Power or really just your Fire Stab in general, depending on the type it went for. So overall, Venusaur already would be very hard to check. If you think about other really good defensive Pokemon, try and think of something that actually takes on Grass, Fire, Poison, and Ground. It's a fairly hard type set to actually take on, and with Venusaur having stab for 3 of those with this set, overall would be really good. You could still go with the Terra Ground set, which would be fairly decent for you, and just take advantage of Weather Ball with the Sun boosting for Fire. That would also be a good option, and essentially you have 4 really strong attacks at that point. But I think that using Earth Power as really just a last resort sort of coverage option and using the other 3 as stabs would be more beneficial. You still get some good options, obviously, with Sleep Powder being just a level up move for Venusaur, which is really appreciated on a Pokemon like this. The only area that Scovillain would really outpace in is, outclass in, I should say, is the fact that it also gets Rage Powder, but Scovillain's also not really bulky enough to take advantage of that, so Venusaur not having access to it, I don't think really makes a difference. Moving on, though, we have Charizard. Now, Charizard, I'm sure you've heard your favorite PokeTuber talk about how they're either sick of it or really glad it's going to be coming back, or think it just will be really broken. And I think Charizard will just be really broken. We have the Solar Power on this for 1. It's a base 100 speed too, which will compare to Pokemon on some teams like Chiyu, for example. But more importantly than that, Charizard's ability Solar Power. You could really take advantage of this thing into a strong special attacker. In fact, even in the OU tier, we've seen this thing be able to roll Blissey with Terra Fire, Specs Overheat in the Sun, which I know it sounds like a lot to get set up, but it's a lot less than you think. You only need to Terra Fire once, you only need to switch in the Sun, and then your Charizard starts dealing insane amounts of damage. And keep in mind, Blissey is one of the most sped F Pokemon that exists in the game. And Charizard could obviously go for stuff like Life Orb and still do that same sort of damage output, because Blissey just doesn't exist in doubles. No one's really running Blissey as their defensive check. So when we get into egregious examples like Blissey, though, as Pokemon that can't even take the Charizard hit anymore, it really starts to make you wonder what will actually take on this Charizard hit. When we start going for stuff like Solar Power, Choice Specs, with Terrestrial Fire, and we start throwing on moves like Weather Ball even, so then you don't have to drop your stats. If we take on even just like a Blissey stat line, Blissey going for that max speed F, max HP is still guaranteed to hit KO in the Sun. by a Choice Specs Terrifier Weather Ball. I do say Max Speed F as just a more truly egregious way to paint this picture, because Blissey typically has to run Fizz Def or just O-code by a neutral hit from a physical attacker that doesn't even invest, because it's just that weak on the physical side. However, it can't even avoid the 2 KO from Terrifier's Charizard with the Speed F, even from Weather Ball, let alone Overheat, which Overheat would go all the way up. Keep in mind the Weather Ball rolls are 55 to 65. With Overheat, you would go to 71 to 85 from the Choice Specs Terrifier Charizard in the Sun, with which just, again, insane how much damage this will do. I think you'll see this thing a lot on teams with something like Prankster Tailwind Murkrow. They could always run the Sunny Day as a backup to Torkoal. You might see this thing on teams with Talonflame even, to just try and have Talonflame maybe burn attackers that would try and dent you, or just go for taunt on potential Trick Room leads. I think realistically, either way, you're going to see this thing on Tailwind. It will be one of the better Tailwind Sun abusers in my opinion. It'll at least give Chiyu a run for its money personally. Chiyu's ability is better for the team, but Charizard as well just breaks so fucking well. I think this will legitimately be a good threat. Clefairy is coming back. Clefairy, the bane of everyone's existence. Friend Guard is really fucking good. Having a really good Violet Friend Guard user again will be valuable. Realistically, I still think that Mousehold might give this thing a little bit of competition, but Clefairy has a lot better support moves than Mousehold does. While Mousehold gets stuff like Follow Me, Clefairy will as well. It's a great Follow Me user. Not only this, but Clefairy also gets moves such as Healing Wish. Well, at least I think it might get Healing Wish. Jury's still out on that one. Same as Knockoff. But realistically, though, this will probably still get options like, for example, Icy Wind. Icy Wind is a pretty likely option in this Pokemon. We might also get Imprison, which could be valuable actually for opposing Mouseholds, being able to imprison the Follow Me, still go for it on your end, and lock your opponent out of valuable redirection. Could actually be fairly good on Clefairy. Realistically as well, the pure Fairy typing is going to be valuable, as we don't have a lot of great Fairy types currently in the format. It's typically Terrestrial Fairy, so having a really bulky Fairy like this will be appreciated. Speaking of really good bulky Fairies, Alola Ninetales. I know you might be wondering, why did I say a bulky Fairy? Well, with the Snowscape now actually being able to boost Fizz Def, Alola Ninetales turns into actually a fairly bulky Fizz Def Fairy. We've seen this with the Abomasnow, where Abomasnow is already a pretty good option of Snowscape, and it's made Abomasnow actually just now a viable Pokemon. And now imagine this, having a viable Hail setter that has 109 speed, which outpaces a fair amount of the metagame. You have valuable speed control with Icy Wind. You have support with the Roarville, and you're already bulky enough to now set that up without necessarily needing a Focus Sash, though it is still appreciated. You could obviously trade that up for Covert Cloak now. You could also utilize Terra Ghost with the Focus Sash to maybe just get around the Fake Outs that would not only stall you out a turn of Hail, but also would break your Sash easily. You really do have like a perfect metagame for Alola Ninetales, and I think this will actually be an incredible support Pokemon. Alola Ninetales is probably going to have a better generation than it's ever had. We have a ton of really good setup users, stuff like, for example, Garchomp is a great setup user with Sword Stance. We have a lot of Dragon Dance users like Roaring Moon that this could pair really well with. We have SD Iron Hands, which would be insane to KO under a Roarville, and with this being a lot easier of a way to set it up than just going with 2 slow Pokemon as a lead, I think you really are in a great position to where this could have a genuinely amazing generation. You still get some other great options in your moveset, such as Hypnosis, for example. Disable and Encore will be extremely valuable in this Pokemon. Like, I really do think that if we go through this Pokemon's moveset, this is the ultimate support Pokemon right now. I think there's only one Pokemon coming back that I think will actually be a genuinely better support piece, and only a couple existing, such as Grimmsnarl and maybe Murkrow, but I think Murkrow still kind of fears power creep. And also, I'm going to be honest, I think Murkrow's actually dead after these DLCs hit. But I can really only see Grimmsnarl actually rivaling this in support for currently existing Pokemon, and only one other Pokemon actually rivaling it as far as returning Pokemon for support. But I do think Alola Ninetales will actually see a huge spike in metagame usage, more so than we've actually seen in previous generations. I think this will truly be like the generation of Alola Ninetales. Moving on to Pokemon that could take advantage of Alola Ninetales, though, Snorlax. Belladrum Snorlax, I think, will have a huge generation this time around. Being able to Terra into a type that's not normal will be insane for getting this thing a really strong Belladrum stab. I think the fact that Snorlax already never really needed to run a normal type move to begin with, though it could gain luxury and stuff like body like a body slam, will be insanely valuable. We might also see Curselax. Curselax could be fairly good. This does get moves like Body Press, for example, to take advantage of that. So you could, in theory, just go for like a Fizz Def setup with Body Press and just go with like a Body Press Terra Ghost set, for example, that could go with like Body Press, Curse, Recycle, and then some sort of filler Ghost Stab like Terra Blast, and that would be really obnoxious to switch around. Overall, I think Snorlax will be a really good Pokemon. I think it's going to be on the lower end for sure, but Belladrum Snorlax always finds a way to be viable. So I think that realistically, this Snorlax will still have some good partners. You could maybe use this on a Trick Room team with stuff like a Moongus or Mousehold or even Indeedee. And in fact, Indeedee I think will be an amazing Lax partner, and especially with Terrestrial being able to take advantage of the fact that you no longer are going to get screwed over by fighting, this will really be a good generation for Snorlax. So we'll have to see. Granbull's up next. Granbull's probably going to be one of the weakest ones in this list, truthfully. I have a couple that I think might give competition for the weakest slot, but I think a Granbull will have a few things that will actually benefit it. For one, we don't have a lot of good fairies right now, and I think the fact that this could be a really good check in tandem with Terrestrial for stuff like Garchomp, Roaring Moon, etc. will be really good. It's a good Pokemon as well as far as a physical attacker goes. Physical attackers have been fairly valuable this generation. You also get a pretty well-rounded coverage set on Granbull, considering the fact that this did used to be a fairy type, a normal type. Stuff like Close Combat, you get stuff like Play Rough as a stab option. You get stuff like Low Kick, which could be a little bit better depending on how heavy the meta skews. Ice Fang and Ice Punch are pretty good. You get Seismic Toss, which Seismic Toss might get cut. I feel like it is a realistic expectation. But even if it does even if it doesn't stick around, you still get some good support options like Taunt, for example, and Thunder Wave, which will likely keep on this moveset. This could be a good bulk up attacker, similar to how Scrappy would play with Intimidate. But ultimately, I think this will just be a nice, unique option for Fairy. I know that last generation, at least, and obviously it could change this generation, but last generation I was building with my good pal Fletch, and we realized that Granbull would have fixed a lot of teams in that later sort of the format. Like right before the restricted came into play, we realized that Granbull could have been a really good fit for a lot of builds, and I do think that might still carry into this generation because of how many good dragons we have. But we'll have to see how this plays out. Now, similar to Venusaur, we have one of the best rain Pokemon coming back, Kingdra. Kingdra will be an insane option, and I think we'll see a lot of builds with stuff like Terra Flying, Terra Grass will probably be the primary ones. I really don't think this will end up carrying over a stab, personally. Though you could, I guess, go for Terra Water or Dragon to just boost your options in those. I think that Terra Grass will be amazing for Gastrodon matchups, and then you'll still have Draco, which can hit the Terra Fire sets well. Just Grass would be a little bit more of a immediate way to pressure it, I guess. I think if anything, we'll actually see some rise in Terra Fairy Gastrodon because of this Pokemon, because Terra Fairy Gastrodon would wall your stabs immediately, which might, I guess, lead Kingdra to either pair with a really good Fairy check, or maybe go with something like a Terra Steel, and then utilize coverage like Flash Cannon in its moveset, so then you can still hit it pre-Terra. But I don't know. I think Kingdra will be really good. It's gonna be a little bit... I think it's going to be worse than Venusaur because I think Sun inherently just has a lot better of a time this generation. But this could be a really good special breaker next to something like Palathin, and you could actually get a lot of mileage out of that combination, in my opinion. But we'll have to see. This will be an interesting one for sure. Porygon 2 is up next. Porygon 2 has had a couple of really good generations. Generation 7 was amazing for it. Generation 8 was amazing for it. And I don't really think Generation 9 will be different. Now, a couple big things. For one of the most viable Pokemon is a fighting type this generation, and it's a Trick Room fighting type at that, which already does hurt Porygon 2. However, you could, in theory, actually take advantage of Terrestrial Ghost on this Pokemon, and essentially pull off a Dusclops troll that has Recover. And I think that actually is something that, realistically, should not be slept on. The fact that we do have a Pokemon that could violate just Terra Ghost, have very few weaknesses, have raw recover, and have really good offenses at that. 105 special attack is nothing to sleep on. This could, genuinely speaking, just take a roll from Dusclops and just outright invalidate it. Now, Dusclops still has some benefits that this wouldn't have. For one, Will-O-Wisp is a pretty big deal, but even still, Porygon 2 could utilize other status moves, or just go for something like Recover, Trick Room, Shadow Ball, and Ice Beam, which would be fairly good coverage. You could get a lot of mileage out of Porygon 2, though, and I think that, realistically, the way that this will be used, I think, genuinely will just depend on what ends up getting introduced specifically in the DLC it comes out in. But I think that Porygon 2 will definitely have a place in the metagame. It's going to be one of the best Trick Room setters for sure. This will probably take out a lot of Trick Room rolls from stuff like Indeedee, in my opinion. But we'll have to see. This will be an interesting one. Smirgle. We all know what Smirgle's going to fucking do. Let's just cry about it. Smirgle is already slated for the DLC. Let's just remember the better times where you didn't have to worry about stuff like Spore. Thankfully, no Dark Void. That's going to be a huge benefit from Generation 7. But, like, what's the point? Smirgle's still going to be a fairly good option with stuff like Spore. You're going to have stuff like Taunt. You can go with Nuzzle. Like this just has to be a support Pokemon. But it's going to be a very good support Pokemon. I don't think we'll see Smirgle on every team. It's not going to be like in Generation 7 where this is one of the best support Pokemon. I think we have enough variants and options now. And especially with support Pokemon opting for stuff like Covert Cloak, Smirgle will have a little bit more difficult of time actually running that, which could actually mean that Smirgle might not have as potent of a metagame as it did in 7. Even if you disregard the fact that Dark Void is cut, I think there's enough going out of its favor to where it will still be viable. It is objectively still going to be viable. But not being able to viably run Covert Cloak because of how frail this thing is could actually be a good thing. So we'll have to see. I think this definitely will be an interesting meta for Smirgle for sure, but I'm not really too sure if this will be a really viable or just a really outclassed Pokemon at this point. Because even support Pokemon like Grimmsnarl, for example, can run Covert Cloak viably. It can also run Light Screen viably. We also have other support Pokemon like Talonflame, which again, bulky enough to run Covert Cloak. Like these 35, 45 defenses are just not pulling that off. So it'll be interesting, but I think this will be, while worse than previous generations, still viable. Hitmontop. I hate Hitmontop. I actually don't think Hitmontop's good, but it always finds a way to be valuable. Realistically, Intimidate is always going to be a good ability. This gets stuff like Fake Out as well, which is good. If we compare this thing to other Intimidate Pokemon, one niche this thing definitely does have is the fact that it can pressure Incineroar fairly well, while also getting some good Fake Out support. And on top of it as well, you get better, like slightly better support in Scrappy, albeit it's not much, and they're pretty similar support. Actually, I think they get like the same support, but one of the biggest things this has is stuff like, I guess Sucker Punch is a pretty good value and priority, as well as Mach Punch. So the fact this has other priority is pretty good. You can make this thing work with Technician as well, but just why? I think this is one of the weaker options coming back, and truthfully, once Incineroar's back, I think a lot of Intimidators are just gonna plummet, which I guess this spoils Incineroar's coming back. But let's face it, you saw this on the thumbnail. Why did you think otherwise? I'm not lying to you guys. But with Incineroar coming back, realistically, Hitmontop is just going to be such a really big counterpick to Incineroar, I guess. But it's still going to be significantly worse than Incineroar. And same as every Intimidator for what it's worth. This will still find a way to be viable. Up next, Ludicolo. Now, Ludicolo is probably going to be one of, if not the worst Pokemon we're going to mention today. But it's still a Pokemon that always finds a way to be viable with Rain. Being a Kyogre check is nothing to be slept on. And especially with the fact that you could go with Swift Swim as a way to outpace it and take advantage of Kyogre. Really good. You could go with something like a Terra Ground set that could actually pressure Terrafire Gastrodons pretty well. And it gives Ludicolo actually a fairly good coverage set, with Water, Grass, and Ground being fairly unique coverage sets to handle. Overall, Ludicolo will just be kind of average, but it's going to be a fairly good enough Rain Sweeper to where it's mentioned on today's list. Milotic is up next. Now, competitive Milotic I think will actually have a huge niche this generation, considering the fact that a lot of teams' ways of dealing with Intimidate is either through Defiant Pokemon, which can get burned at the very least, or with Clear Amulet, which means you just don't fight it. But the competitive in particular, we're still seeing a good enough uptick in Intimidate users. Stuff like Incineroar are still one of the most used Pokemon. Not Incineroar, Arcanine is still one of the most used Pokemon. So despite all these nerfs against potential Defiant users or just Intimidate in general, we're still seeing the fact that Arcanine is getting a lot of usage. So I think that Milotic, therefore, will get a lot of usage as well as a potential way to not only take advantage of Arcanine, but it would pressure it significantly better. You could go for something like, for example, a Terra Flying Milotic, which would be great for Terra Grass sets, while you still have the Hydro Pump to handle the pure Fire Arcanines. I think that this will, if anything, maybe shift the metagame towards a Terra Grass set, which could also, I don't really think that Terra Ice Milotic will be the adaptation to that, because for one, well actually no, it would be Terra Water sets, which Terra Grass Milotic won't really be the adaptation. I guess you could maybe make Terra Grass work, but even still, that's going to be weak to sets such as Flare Blitz Arcanine. Terra Electric might be a thing, but I think realistically, Milotic being weak to ground, which Milotic is supposed to cover, wouldn't really be great. Its speed isn't good enough for that, but I think that Milotic will still, just generally speaking, be a good Terrestrial user defensively. I think it'll be outclassed by stuff like Gastrodon as far as Terrestrial water types go, but Terrestrial Pokemon that are water type that can Terrestrial to other types go. But Milotic will still be good just because of competitive alone. Dusclops. This will just be Porygon II with Will-O-Wisp. I think my notes still stand. The recovery this thing gets is like Rust or Pain Split, but overall, it's just Porygon with Will-O-Wisp, and that's really all it needs to do. The fact this thing does get Pressure as an ability, though, will be good, as well as Frisk, though Frisk will be actually completely useless in open team sheet formats. So Pressure will still be good to PP stall, but at the same time, does it really matter anymore? The fact that Recover got nerfed so heavily, a lot of these defensive Pokemon, while still good, it's a lot easier to take advantage of them. So I think a Dusclops will be a little more viable, I guess, in the sense that it's a bulky Pokemon that was already good without recovery. Not having it will hurt it less, I guess, but I don't know. I feel like this is just Porygon with Will-O-Wisp over Recover. That's really all it is. It's a pretty short one. Metagross. Metagross will be a good Terrestrial user, in my opinion. I think realistically, Metagross will do some sort of Terrestrial weakness policy sets to where you might see like a Terra Ground set with Aqua Jet pairing from something like Walking Wake, or maybe something like Azu, for example, or something maybe like a Surf Sneasel next to this, to where, again, you're going for the Terra Ground. You're going to have Earthquake as a now stab option, and then also still have stuff like Steel and Psychic as other stabs from your previous typing. I think you could throw that on with like an Ice Punch set and just make this thing snowball teams. Realistically, Metagross will just be doing the things it did with Dynamax, but instead it's going to be with Terastal, and I think it's just going to be a fairly good option. This is a great option for teams when the new fairy types do come into the format to handle them, as Bullet Punch is a really strong way to handle all of those fairy types. It's going to be interesting to see what Metagross does. Clear Body as well is just Clear Amulet, but as an ability, which is amazing for this Pokemon. We don't really have a valuable Clear Body Pokemon in the current metagame. In fact, as far as Clear Body goes currently, we don't really have one outside of Pull, and I guess Garganicle, but no one's fucking running Clear Body Garganicle. But there's not even one that exists. So I think that realistically Metagross coming back will be huge, actually, because it's a physical attacker that does not need to worry about running Clear Amulet, which is a good thing. We might also see Terra Fire sets, which could be interesting, actually, as Steel does wall its primary stabs, and that would be a good way to avoid burn on a weakness policy build, and it would still take advantage of the Water-type Pokemon that can easily pop weakness policy through stuff like Chet or through Surf Pokemon. So I think this could actually be a really good partner with Pull, actually. You could burn physical attackers that would be like physical grounds. You'd get a really fast surf off into this. You still get coverage for a lot of different Pokemon, and Metagross could handle fairies for it. I'm actually kind of curious if Pull Metagross will see usage. I feel like that'd be a good core. Obviously, it's giving up the speed that Colossal would have, but I feel like this would be a bit more consistent, at least, despite not having the speed tier. And you could throw it next to a good Thunder Wave Pokemon. Pull still gets Thunder Wave. I'm kind of curious. I think this would be a good Pokemon regardless, though. Infernape. Infernape's going to be a fairly hit or miss one, I think. For one, it's a starter that gets Fake Out, which is good. It's a faster Fake Out user. Its coverage set is really well rounded. Infernape will be kind of niche for sure, but it gets some good support picks like Encore, Fake Out. You get some stuff like Taunt, obviously. I'm interested to see how Infernape fares. I think it's going to be an interesting mon for sure. I don't think it'll be something that will top cut consistently. I think we'll see it top cut at least a couple times, though. Like I'm talking a top cut, like a top 8 performance. We might even see it win a regional, I think, weirdly enough, because it's just a really fast Fake Out fighting type that has really well-rounded coverage, and I think its coverage it gets as well could take advantage of Terastal fairly easily. This might be a Sun Fake Out pick for sure, but I think outside of maybe like a Sun Fake Out one, that we're not really going to see a lot of usage out of this, other than maybe good priority if stuff like Chiampow's attacking meta, because the Mach Punch plus like a Fake Out Pokemon could be really good. Though I guess Chiampao might just adapt to Terra Ghost at that point if it really minded. I don't know. It'll be interesting, because I guess, in fact, actually, speaking of that, this also takes advantage of Chi-Yu, because it's a faster Pokemon than Chi-Yu, and it could just pressure it really well. We could see this thing adapt essentially to really any common Chi-Yu Terra type. Whether it's Grass for Gastron matchups, you would pressure it. Whether it's Terra Dark to boost Dark Pulse damage, this would pressure it. Worst case scenario, Terra Fire is still neutral to fighting, so you would be able to actually do some good damage against it. Infernape could be interesting. I think this will be a mon to keep an eye out for. Weaker on the list, sure, but it's still something to keep an eye out for, in my opinion. Nanim Swine. Nanim Swine's gonna be fucking nuts with Terra. You can Terra into a type that's just better than Ice Ground defensively, while having the benefits of having Stab, Ice, and Ground, which is an amazing offensive typing. I think that realistically we'll either see pure Terra Ice on Hail teams, or maybe we'll see something like Terra Ground, similar to how Garchomp does on Tailwind teams. We could also maybe see Terra Water or Fire sets that could take advantage of the defensive benefits those would have. With Water, essentially, it would be, well, no, you probably wouldn't see Water because it's still Grass Weak. You'd probably see Fire, actually. I think Terra Fire could be good. You would lose the weakness to Grass as well as Water. Well, no, you'd still be weak to Water. I'm not sure. Maybe we see Terra Grass. Terra Grass could be interesting, actually. You would gain you would lose the weakness to stuff like, for example, the Water typing, while still having Thick Fat to pad out your Fire and Ice weakness. It could actually be interesting. I think this might be something that could be worth exploring. It would also be good for Gastrodon because you get coverage for it, whether it's through Ground for the Terra Fire sets, whether it's through Ice for a Terra Grass that might be used for Ground plus Grass Walling, whether it's Terra Grass that could beat the pre-Terra typing. In general, again, this would just be a really good Gastrodon Massacre Pokemon. In general, though, Nanim Swine will be really good. I think Thick Fat will especially be great with Terra. And this thing is good enough priority as well, and a great physical attack set where Tailwind teams will appreciate this. Excadrill. Sand will finally be viable. It's kind of okay with Lycanroc, but Drill will be an amazing Terra user. You could use this with like Terra Electric, for example, for Corviknight matchups, which I know Corviknight's not exactly the best Pokemon, but it is seeing usage right now, and I think Corviknight will continue to see usage with how good Intimidate is, and the fact that it could Terastal into a better typing. We could see that, because realistically, any Terra type that Corviknight would want to Terra into would be fucked over by one of Ground, Steel, or Electric, if I had to guess. The best thing I could think of maybe would be like a Terra Cross set, but even still, Steel will do some good damage to that with like a Sword Stance build. I don't know, we'll have to see. I think Drill will be viable. I don't think it's going to be like a top tier pick. In fact, I think this is going to be one of the worst metas that Drill's had outside of Gen 8. But I still think it'll also be a good metagame for this, if nothing else. Assuming that, well, actually, no, that's a lie. You'll need Terra Ice. You'll need Terra Ice for the Lando matchup. That's what you'll really need. You'll need fucking Terra Ice. Which, in theory, should pressure any Lando Terra type outside of Water, which you still could hit that neutrally with Ground at least, which is good. But yeah, no, you'll need Terra Ice for the Lando matchup for sure. Which I'm only saying Lando because it's a home Pokemon. I'm going over strictly here only the Pokemon that are slated for the DLCs, not for home. So Lando is not on this list before anyone asks. Otherwise, that would have been on the thumbnail. Conk. Conk is going to be an interesting one, actually. I think this will be a really good Trick Room fighting type. You could maybe use this with like a Terra Normal set and just be a slightly slower Hariyama, or like a Terra Dark set and just be a slightly slower Hariyama. The one thing that this will not get, and it's sad that this is the case, is no Fake Out. If this thing somehow got Fake Out, I think this would just outright replace Hariyama, because it's just a slower, harder hitting version of Hariyama. However, you still have Guts, which is still pretty appreciated. The speed tier will actually be good, as you could maybe pair this with like a terrain set, and maybe go with like Indeedee as your Trick Room user, which could be good. Currently, that core was ran with like Hariyama and Farigiraf to get around the priority, while still getting Trick Room up, and then having Terra Dark get the same sort of benefit. But if you want Psychic Terrain, do you really need the Fake Out user? Interesting thing to think about. Indeedee would also still get some redirection for Conk, which is cool because with Terra fighting or Terra Normal or Terra Dark Conk, you would break so fucking easily that it wouldn't really matter. So yeah, I think this could actually be a good Pokemon. I take it back. This isn't just going to matter off of Fake Out. This will just be good with Indeedee, I think. Whimsical. I talked about the Demon Fucker already. This is the best support Pokemon that will be coming back. This will be the premier support Pokemon again. You can get some good stats like Tailwind, stuff like Sunspore with potential Screen. I think this gets both screens, but even if it only gets one, that's fine. Sadly, yeah, this only gets Light Screen. They should give it Reflect. You get some good stuff like Switcheroo, for example, Taunt. This will probably lose Toxic, but it'll still keep stuff like a Memento, Encore. Yeah, this will be a good pick. You could make this into a potentially good Dozo counter with stuff like Cotton Guard sets being a really good way to wall Dozos. They would essentially need to run a Terra type just for this, and run Terra Blast just for this, but even still, you could go for like an Encore and kind of fuck it up that way. And then go for Cotton Guards, you could chew the hits from this really well. This could actually be a really good Dozo counter now that I'm thinking about it. Leech Seed sets will be amazing. We'll see some really good support sets with Tailwind. Yeah, this will just be one of the best Pokemon. Everyone fucking knows what Whimsical does, and I don't think that any of that will change this format. Really, the one thing that happens, and the reason why I think this will just outright outclass Smirgle, is this could viably run Covert Cloak, and Smirgle cannot. So yeah, really fucking good support Pokemon, especially with that Fairy typing being great for Darks that would otherwise be immune to pranks or shenaniganry. Really fucking good support Pokemon. Scrappy. I think Scrappy will be good. It's going to probably be about as viable as Hitmontop is. Slightly bulkier stats, which trades out for the fact that Hitmontop has a pure fighting typing, which could be to its benefit or detriment, I guess. Hands being a viable Pokemon will actually hurt this thing a lot. You'll need this thing to essentially be a good Terra user, which Terra could actually be the saving grace for this thing, as it could be a Terramon that could be similar speed in Trick Room. You can get Intimidate off, you get some good support, like for example, Dragon Tail, which could phase it out. So for better or worse, this will probably have to be a Terra user if you're bringing it, but it could be a decent one nonetheless. Overall, still good Intimidator, still gonna be significantly worse than Incineroar. I guess this would check Incineroar slightly better because you're also walling the Dark Stab a little bit better, but that's really about it. Yeah, kind of average. Reuniclist. I'm only mentioning Reuniclist here because the Trick Room Pokemon, it's really fucking slow, and the fact that it has Magic Guard. This would essentially be a perfect way around Garganacl without needing Covert Cloak. It's a really good bulky Pokemon that can do that job as well. This would have natural recovery, which could be good, and you could literally just outstall Garganacl with this. You get good coverage for really any sort of Terra type you would want to go for, whether you're going for Psychic or Grass moves. You would essentially be able to handle any common Garg outside of Ghost for super effective, which Ghost is fine. You'd still hit it neutrally for what it's worth. You could go for some sort of setup set with this thing. You can go for Encore strategies. I think this will be interesting. I hope it keeps Knockoff, because if it kept Knockoff, that could also be good to knock off opposing Covert Cloak Mons and then use this with Garganacl for some really good damage. But we'll have to see. Overall, really interesting pick. I think Terra will be great on this thing. In fact, you can make this thing into a really good Terra Water Pokemon and not have to give a fuck about Garganacl, which is really, really interesting for Reuniclist. So I think this will be good. Probably one of the best metas Reuniclist has had in a while, to be honest. Chandelure. I'm only mentioning this thing because it has a weird enough support moveset to where, for example, You could Terra this thing into a good Flash Fire pick that could also potentially wall Chi-Yu. Could be interesting. You could use this thing as a good enough Trick Room setter with Imprison to handle other Trick Rooms, similar to how you would use Gardevoir for that role. Could be interesting. You could use this thing with like a Calm Mindset with Terra and just be offensive on Tailwind. Could be kind of fun. It's especially offensive enough with like 145 special attack to where this will do something. I don't know what it will do, but it will find a way to do something, I think. We'll see it at least top cut once in a regional, and I think it's noteworthy enough. Myanchia. Myanchia is fast enough. It gets stuff like Fake Out. It's essentially just Infernape, but it leans slightly more offensive in the physical side, and it has Regenerator and Reckless, which are two good abilities. I don't know. This will be fine enough. I think it's just going to be similar to Infernape, where it's a good Fake Out user. The one benefit that Infernape would have, though, is the fact that it naturally could actually be a good Chi-Yu counter, which Chi-Yu will still be a prevalent Pokemon, I'm sure, by then. And that's fine. Myanchia could still, in theory, handle it pre-Terra, but even still, I think that Myanchia having just a little bit better support options could be beneficial, and the fact that just a little bit better offensively speaking could be beneficial. I think Infernape will just outclass it, but this fucking move Ally Switch right here could maybe be the deciding factor, I guess. Though with the Ally Switch nerf, I'm not really sure. This has enough really weird stuff to where I think it'll find a place, but it's not going to be common. Manibus, one of the best Pokemon coming back. Ladies and gentlemen, Manibus will be so fucking good. I'm really hoping this thing keeps knockoff, because if it does, this will be one of the best manual Tailwind setters. This will probably outclass Corviknight just outright, definitively. If this thing has knockoff, though, you'll get stuff like knockoff, Tailwind, Roost, and Snarl, and just beat a majority of teams. You can go with Seed sets, you can go with Covert Cloak sets, you could go with a lot of different things, honestly, and this Pokemon will find a way to be viable. Manibus, though, genuinely looking forward to this Pokemon being back. Manibus, you've been missed for way too long. I cannot wait to run you in my 2024 teams, but yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. I don't even think this will need to Terra, but if it does Terra, sets like maybe Terra Water could be decent. Again, like with Covert Cloak could be really beneficial. You could go for stuff like Terra Steel, maybe. I'm not really sure what this would even need a Terra for. That Dark Flying typing is really good defensively. It's only really weak to stuff like Fairy, which is the reason I'm thinking that Terra Steel might be a thing. But I don't know, I think that Manibus will just be a good Pokemon. It's something you never really need to Terra, besides maybe in like one specific matchup in a Blue Moon. But yeah. Incineroar. We all knew this thing was coming. We all sadly knew that our time without Incineroar was short-lived, and it seems like it's going to be short-lived. It's really good. Incineroar just is a good Pokemon, objectively speaking. Parting Shot is an amazing move, though U-Turn might have a bit more merit, because Parting Shot is outright stopped by Clear Amulet, so you might see a shift to U-Turn sets on Assault Vest. Assault Vest was probably one of its best sets anyway, for what it's worth. It's a great support piece. Its bulk is so good. Its utility it offers is so good with stuff like Will-O-Wisp, Parting Shot, Taunt, etc. You can make this a good offensive piece. You could take advantage of Terrestrial as well with this thing, potentially, on an offensive set, with something like a Terra Grass to get around Earthquakers, as well as to pressure Gastrodon, for example, or just take hits from Dondozo a little bit better. You could go with something like a Terra Fairy set, Pure Terra Dark. You really do have a lot of options with this Pokemon. I would be shocked if Incineroar does not make top 10 usage again. I don't know if it'll necessarily be the most used Pokemon. In fact, I think Hands might give it some competition, as well as Flutter Mane potentially. But I would be genuinely shocked if it's not in the top 10, let alone top 5. This is going to be a more balanced meta for Incineroar for what it's worth, but it's still going to find a way to be fucking insane. Primarina. Primarina will be interesting. The fact this thing is a really good sponge Pokemon like Walking Wake and Chi-Yu will actually be a fairly good case for this thing. We can maybe see Primarina on teams that would either be with like rain or just outright stopping weather altogether. This could be a decent Trick Room threat. You could pop this thing as well with Aqua Jet to partner with stuff like Weakness Policy Mons that run a Terra Fire or Terra Ground type. I think this will be an objectively viable pick. It's going to be great on Trick Room teams. It might be a decent Tailwinder, but I think at the same time, well, actually no, yeah, because you do naturally outpace. Oh no, never mind, it's level 100. What's level 50 speed tier actually? Yeah, you wouldn't outpace the bundles. It's very unfortunate. You could have Tailwind, I guess, but even still, you wouldn't outpace Booster Bundle, which is unfortunate. Regardless though, it'll still be fine. I think this will be a great Terra user for what it's worth. If I had to guess, Terra Fairy will probably be the set of choice, as you could get a set that would really massacre Garganacl without needing to keep your water typing, and that would be really decent. You could go for Terra Water sets though and boost the Liquid Voice, Hyper Voice, and that could be pretty good for you as well. Gets around sub users. But I don't know. This will be a good pick for sure. I'm just not sure what specifically. Comfey. Comfey will be great for popping weakness policies. It's going to do the same thing it did last gen, where it's going to get Triash healing with stuff like Draining Kiss. You're going to get stuff like Leech Seed. You'll get stuff like Screens, Trick Room, etc. Helping Hand. This will just be a good support Pokemon. Comfey will objectively be better. Whimsical will objectively be better, but I would be shocked if we didn't see at least like a whole couple % usage on Comfey. It'll be good enough. It's still a great weakness policy popper, and with Terastal, I still think it's a viable thing. Regardless, though, we do have one more Pokemon. Como. Como, I think, will be an amazing Terastal Pokemon, actually. One of the things that it's weakest to right now is Fairies, and with Terastal Steel or Poison coming back, this will be an absolute monster. Clanger Soul Sets, I think, will be at an all-time high, actually, on this Pokemon, and for good reason. I think we'll see this thing with running like a Throat Spray set, where it's going to run like a Terastal Steel with like Flash Cannon, Aura Sphere, and like a Fire move, and it's just going to not care the fact that it doesn't really need a Dragon attack, because it really doesn't. You could also obviously go for dragon attacks, you can go for physical sets with Clear Amulet, you can go for a lot of different things. But Como, I think, will truly be at an all-time high, and especially when you pair it with Pokemon like Clefairy that could give Friend Guard support with also Heal Pulse, this will be a Pokemon to be reckoned with. And mark my words, Como will be a monster in this format. I genuinely believe that this thing will be an amazing Terra user. It's going to be doing roles, well, not as potent as Dragonite because it has really good Terra normal priority, but it will be doing offensive roles similar to Dragonite, similar to Garchomp. I think it will genuinely be, like, again, stuff like Baxcalibur as well, it will genuinely be rivaling their usage. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. If you guys enjoyed this video and you want to see more, leave a like in the video and subscribe for more. Shout out to channel members, of course, your guys' support is greatly appreciated. We have Josh, aka Ultra Player, Mia, Zeke Zero, Matt O'Shea, Koemi, and we have a new channel member today as well, being Bbat. Welcome to the channel. I am seeing here that you joined a couple days ago, but I had bulk recorded my previous content ahead of when you did become a channel member, so unfortunately, I did miss you on that. But with that said, I'll see you guys later. Until then, peace out, guys.